Should they pull out their opponent's heart, or simply rip his head off just to see his spinal cord dangle in a pool of blood?
The year 1992. The game Mortal Kombat. And it kind of changed everything as we view gaming today. It's basically attributed to being the reason why the ESRB was created. It brought in a whole new audience of gamers, showing that games could be made for groups other than just kids. It could be more entertaining than just something you put your kids in front of to keep them entertained. Mortal Kombat kind of released in this interesting time frame for the media industry in general. So in 1992, Mortal Kombat enters arcades, and it spread like wildfire. There are people still lining up at arcades to play Street Fighter. I mean, that changed the whole arcade scene. Really kind of gave birth to the modern fighting game community as well, Street Fighter 2, when it hit arcades. And then Mortal Kombat kind of comes along and says, yeah, we see what you're doing, Street Fighter. We're going to take it up a notch. So they actually choreographed and mocapped all of their characters. If you go back and look at the original Mortal Kombat, you'll see that the characters aren't just like animated sprites. They look almost like a watered-down photorealistic image, and that's because it's exactly what it was. It was a fully mocapped game, and then you had the fatalities, and the mocapping made all this much more visceral and authentic and realistic looking, as opposed to games like Street Fighter. The moves were much more authentic looking, and then it was just viscerally violent. So, whoever won the 2 out of 3 in the arcade, you got the big finish him that would pop up on the screen, and then if you knew the move, you could perform a fatality. If not, most people would just uppercut somebody to win the, to close it out. But you had Sub-Zero, who would punch from under your jaw and pull up your head and your spine, just like rip your whole spinal column out and hold it up, and blood dripping from it, the body drops. Kano, he would rip out your heart, hold it, and then your body would just fall backward onto the ground. Sonya, correct me if I'm wrong here, had the kiss of death. I'm pretty sure she still had that in the first one. Basically melted your body. Everybody had a fatality, but the most notorious, the ones that sparked the most controversy, were Kano and Sub-Zero. They didn't want to just deliver another fighting game. They wanted to really step it up. So they put in the mocapping, they added fatalities, they added blood, and they put other secrets into the game, which were going to become standards going forward in video games. The famous level, the pit, where you're fighting on a bridge and you would see the background or other fights going on at the same time. And you performed your fatality within a certain time of that witch passing by. You could uppercut them. They would fall into the pit and they would get impaled, and there'd be a whole bunch of skulls and heads and body parts down there. But it also gave you the opportunity to fight Reptile, who was another ninja-style fighter similar to Sub-Zero and Scorpion. He just had green instead of the yellow or blue. Kids were flocking to arcades to play this. I was one of them. When I remember that day in school when someone came in and said, hey, I was at timeout yesterday and they have this new game called Mortal Kombat. It's like Street Fighter, except there's blood and you can freaking kill people at the end. I watched some guy rip another guy's heart out and everyone, that was it. Boom, done. After school, everyone's up at the arcade. There wasn't anything this mass marketable as far as video games at this point that had that kind of gore and that realism to it. So it took a lot by storm. And there was a media backlash against it immediately. The news segments were running about this game, trying to convince people in those interviews to say, oh, the only reason you're playing this is because you get to kill the guy at the end, right? There were protests at local arcades. Some arcade owners actually were because a little bit of context, in the 80s and 90s, arcade operators were given a lot of flexibility to altering the game. One of the things they were actually able to do was turn off the fatalities and turn off the blood. And so some arcades tried this and their sales just plummeted. Like no one wanted to play the game anymore. A lot of these places would eventually turn it back on, or they just got rid of the game entirely and ate their losses because they just didn't condone what they were seeing on screen. Around this same time, it starts making its way into Congress. Famously, Joe Lieberman of Connecticut, a U.S. senator, brought these up along with Herb Kohl at a congressional hearing, saying that these games were just glorifying violence to rot the brains of our children. And he notably brought up Mortal Kombat and another game called Night Trap, which starred Dana Plato, which to this day, I still don't understand why they brought Night Trap to this meeting. But he also had famously props from an arcade shooting game. It was a revolver, one of the blue light gun games that you would play in the arcade. And the Senate hearings were already going on about this, and everybody was kind of calling for the same thing. You need to put ratings on these. You need to censor yourselves. It wasn't just video games. Video games happened to be the newest entry into that forum. You know, music and movies that already long existed, and now they're trying to regulate those better. I'd like to believe that Mortal Kombat released, like, they knew what they were doing when they put that game out. And I think it was kind of an answer to buck against that system of, you know, we're going to release what we think is artistically valuable and what we think is artistically legal and appropriate to put out. If parents let their kids play this, that's on them. Nintendo realizes they can't have this game on their system. They can't have these fatalities. They can't have blood. But they also didn't want to lose out on a massive sales opportunity either. So they compromised. And Super Nintendo famously got no blood, and it got no fatalities. It got finishing moves in place of them. Notably, Sub-Zero's ripping your head and spine out became Sub-Zero freezing you and then shattering your body, which in a lot of ways actually made more sense to Sub-Zero. So that came out on console when I was, a year later. So I was 11. Like I said, Super Nintendo had gray sweat instead of blood, had no fatalities, but it had superior graphics and sound to the Sega Genesis counterpart. Now, at this time, Sega and Nintendo are dead rivals. Sega really was seen as like the edgy, this is what your teenager will be playing. So Sega really thrived on that edginess. A lot of their marketing campaign back then was Sega does what Nintendo don't, which I always thought was actually pretty brilliant. We can put our arcade versions unadulterated, uncensored, as is, on the Sega system. They're going to let us. Notoriously, the Sega system, the Genesis, you did have to have, or Mega Drive, if anyone's watching this, that it was called Mega Drive. There was a blood code. You had to put a blood code in that enabled blood. But fatalities, right off the bat, were enabled. They just didn't have blood in them if you didn't have the blood code entered. So everybody who was anybody won the Genesis version. And parents, of course, realized this. And one thing leads to another. They're boycotting it again, just like the arcade version, saying it's, it actually in a lot of ways became a lot worse because in the arcade, it was limited, right? But now we're talking about systems that are in millions of homes. And this is going to expose people to a whole different level. And now you're bringing it into the household. People were afraid like their kids were going to murder them at night, or they were going to become homicidal maniacs and murder their neighbors. What every 10-year-old dreams about doing, going to their neighbor's house and ripping their head and spine out. A single move. And in 1994, the ESRB is founded, mostly due to Mortal Kombat. I would say it's really the only negative that came out of that game. It really elevated gaming to a level that wasn't really thought to have achieved at that point. And it was, games can be made and mass marketed to a much larger audience of older adults, or just older audiences in general. Video games didn't just have to be something you put in front of your kids so that they shut up for the night. It was things that can be enjoyed by an older and more mature audience. And games on PC like Doom, Doom 2, and Wolfenstein 3D kind of were already into that, but PC gaming at this point was insanely expensive. But it also told all of these other developers that were out there that were apprehensive about bringing some of their projects to life that said, you know what, we don't have to try to dumb it down so that, it's just a kid's game. Like, we could make it for the audience that it's intended for. And that really, kind of brings us to where we are today. I would say kind of pioneered that in a way that was mass marketable. Because like I said, there were definitely other games that existed before this that had already championed the cause of mature themes, but Mortal Kombat kind of put it onto the map. It hit the news. It became a worldwide sensation. It was talked about in Congress. And every negative like that means the game becomes that much more popular, especially amongst people that are against the system. My mom would have let me have the Genesis version of the game, convinced my dad to let me get the Genesis version of the game, brought that to many friends' houses, got banned from many friends' houses. Totally worth it. Hell, you couldn't even talk about Mortal Kombat in school. You couldn't bring the strategy guide. You couldn't bring any magazines about it. Couldn't talk about it. Couldn't bring your Game Boy. Couldn't bring your Game Gear. All these things got completely banned. And you get detention or worse, depending on it. Even eventually Nintendo would come around to allowing blood into their games. All of these things started to come along when they realized that they didn't just have to market these games to kids, that Nintendo didn't have just this market squeezed down to just younger audiences, that there were audiences of older adults and older teenagers that were very much engaged in video games, but they just needed the right game to get them engaged. And that's kind of my whole thing on Mortal Kombat, why I'm kind of grateful that they made it. Not for the ESRB, but you cut your losses sometimes, right? But I would say modern gaming and the way that it's viewed now started with Mortal Kombat, where it became accepted, even though it was controversial. It had to get through that troubling period to get to where it is now. So let me know in the comments what the first Mortal Kombat game you played was. Definitely for me was the original in the arcade. Hours and hours spent at Timeout, a Namco-owned arcade before they went out. And thanks for watching.